Welcome to the nextTalk podcast. We are passionate about keeping kids safe in an overexposed world.
It's Mandy and Kim, and we're navigating tech, culture, and faith with our kids. I have to tell you, Mandy and I have fielded so many questions over the years about AI, especially in the last year. It has just garnered so much attention in the news, and parents are just curious about it. Now, Mandy and I did do a show, AI in the Metaverse, but it was me doing research and not really knowing the details of it. I was coming more from a parent perspective, which is good, but we knew right away that we wanted to talk to someone who actually knows this industry and what it means for parents. And since AI is always changing and we're always getting questions, this is a show we wanted to do right off the bat. Anyway, I'm super excited to have our guest on today. His name is Marshall Inshoots, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself to kick it off so you know exactly who we're getting to talk to today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. So it's really been fun to watch the AI industry grow. And a couple months ago, I got to go to y'all's conference here in the Dallas area. And my wife and I both really felt strongly that since technology is always changing, that this is a ministry that we wanted to pour into, because even in that one conference, y'all poured a ton into our lives, into our family. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. I know you spoke to Mandy after the event, and she was just really impressed by you and your passion to be so helpful. So tell us a little bit about your background and your family.
Sure, Kim. So I have been writing software since I was 12. I actually started helping out using sign language, writing some software with that helped kids even in orphanage in Africa. And so I've kind of been passionate in that area of helping people with whatever the latest technology is. I've worked in churches, I've worked in the secular market, and always pushing the boundaries. Some of the first churches to do live streaming on the internet, back when people thought that, the internet was demonic or something. We were out there pushing the gospel on that platform, helping run it, but also even building some of the software that underpinned some of those broadcasts. In addition, more recently, working in the virtual reality space, which I'm sure there's questions about how all of this stuff fits together, these latest buzzwords. I've been in a lot of them for various reasons. We have a small business that really tries to use technology to earn money, as well as to specifically pour into the kingdom as our ultimate goal there. So everything we do really is about pushing the technology boundaries, because that's fun, but also using it for a purpose, which is to advance the kingdom, whether directly or indirectly.
I love to hear when people are able to use their passions and their God-given gifts to further the kingdom. I mean, I think that's really what we're all supposed to do, right?
Yes.
You're a dad too, right?
Yes. So I have 3 kids. They're all in the younger grades. We do homeschooling, and that really gives us an opportunity to pour into their lives with Bible and all those regular subjects, but also even seeing how we can use this technology for younger kids, keeping them from being addicted to technology, but also, and not just being consumers, but also using it to distribute something that glorifies God. It's exciting to see that, where these kids they each have their own unique talents, but God puts them with parents who can understand them. So it's really great seeing how their skills are developing with that. And of course, as technology changes, the things that are here now weren't there when I was a kid or when my parents were kids. And so God has put us all in a unique position in life, in a timeline, in world scale. So it's just really exciting. I love studying that. So it's great to see that and how it relates even down to my specific family.
I love that. I love getting to talk to someone who has both perspectives that we're looking at, the parenting side. Well, really 3, the parenting side, the faith side, and the technology side. That's a hard combination to come by. So I'm excited to jump right in with some of these questions that I have, our team has, and that we've heard from parents. So I think we need to start like base level, right?
Okay.
We need to know really, how would you define AI and VR? And then maybe we can move into how those things are connected.
Sure. Okay. So AI and VR, they're different. So I'm going to start with AI. It's artificial intelligence, And I promise the only time I'm going to say it here, it's a bunch of numbers. So I'm not going to go into all the math. I'm not,
Okay.
this is not an advanced engineering degree or programming where we're going to talk about all that stuff. So don't zone out here. Basically, it's trying to mimic how humans think. It's kind of a better version, or at least it claims to be, or the goal is to be a better version of something like search or creating an image, or even something like a health diagnosis or a legal document. It's trying to do that using all the knowledge out there. And even some of these things go cross-cutting, just like when your kids learn how to put blocks together, that helps them later in life. Like, there's no job out there that's putting blocks together. That it's not direct, it's an indirect way of learning about a future skill. And so AI, we're kind of doing that same thing. We're saying, here's a bunch of knowledge in these various areas. Now go apply it to some other application. It has a whole new way of addressing things that people are still wrapping their heads around. AI could be maybe overwhelming or confusing because of that, because of how unknown it is. But I think that's where we can come in and help understand it more.
Okay, I think I got it. It's taking the information and applying it to all different types of applications where we normally, as just like computer programs, it's very direct, I guess, very specific, whereas AI seems to be able to gather information and apply it beyond that one thing you're asking.
Yeah. So my wife is visual. So she's always like, stop talking and show me a picture. Well, we don't have visuals here, but I can at least paint a word picture here. So with artificial intelligence on images, one of the things you can do is like background removals or help, removing an object. And because it has seen a whole bunch of faces, it knows that if there's a tree branch covering half of someone's face, it can kind of guess what the other side of that person's face looks like, just like you might do. That doesn't mean that it really understands faces or that it understands, human anatomy. It just is kind of saying, well, the pixels on this side match the pixels on that side, and it comes out. So you look a lot of the early models from last year, there was all these photos of people that the photo looked great from AI until you realize the person had 7 fingers. 2 of the fingers were mapped between different hands. There was a thumb on each side of the hand because it didn't know what a hand was. It just was like, hey, let's draw some shapes here. So there's an element here where we have to remember that AI is just, I don't want to get a bad idea that it's only for evil, but, God is creative. Satan is an imitator. The same thing here. Humans, we're still creative. He put that inside of us. And the AI is still, it's an artificial version. It's an imitation. It doesn't have truly this creative, build something out of nothing. It has to start with everything and boil it down to something.
So that really helps me. I mean, when you said it can't come from nothing, it has to come from something. And we as humans are the creatives created by our creator. And so I can also see the flip side of that and why I think so many of our parents, including myself, are concerned about AI. I mean, there's all these stories in the news that we'll touch on, but, correct me if I'm wrong, that creative force could be from someone who has an evil intent. So if you have someone who has an evil intent who is pouring into the AI world, basically, that's where we're seeing some of this stuff that is so scary for parents.
Absolutely. And some of the early adopters of this technology are a bunch of, lonely nerds. At least that's, the stereotypical version. A bunch of people who are smart, who can think a lot. A lot of those people don't have a lot of great human relationships because they've poured into computers, or just because they don't have great relationships, they pour into computers. And so you do see a large percentage of those people looking at pornography or things like that. But then again, look at sports, look at any other industry. So many of those people struggle with addictions as well. It's not that the people making this technology are evil more than others. They just happen to be building something that's a force multiplier through technology. One of the big things that we can look at here is that artificial intelligence, you highlighted it there, it's a multiplier of someone's intentions. If someone intends to use it for good, most likely it's going to come out with good results. If someone intends to use it for evil, very likely it's going to come out with something that is destructive. Good people are using it to make better products, to even using AI to protect others. So while we may think, oh, AI understanding what pornography is or understanding what an evil text is bad, it can also be used, and people are using those filters every day that use AI to detect pornography, to detect lewd behavior, to detect even aggression and tone of voice in text. You know, if you're writing something passive aggressive or down to flat out aggressive using, anti-Semitic language or whatever, even trying to substitute letters to make it not be English, but kind of read like a fake word, using artificial intelligence, they can detect that stuff much more accurately and filter out nuanced logic. Like now where I use the word anti-Semitic, I'm not being anti-Semitic, I'm talking about it. And so the AI can somewhat understand intent if it's been programmed to do that and help protect people. I believe a specific case of that is Apple has, at least can be enabled on their phones, the local ability on the device to detect sexual content in images. So not only can it protect something that you take a photo and say, hey, wait a minute, on a child's account, you can't, are you sure you want to send this out? It's detected to be, violate that filter. The same thing, even messages coming in, it can try to detect it as well and see if those images may be something that they shouldn't be looking at. So it's using those filters here, obviously, for good. Someone could just as easily turn that filter around and only allow the bad stuff through.
This is something we talk about all the time at nextTalk in terms of anything can be used for good or for evil. And that's why the conversation with your kid is so important. And I think this is a great example of, you said a couple of times, sometimes or mostly. And I think that's key, that this AI development, as it's able to better understand the use of words or images, that's pretty incredible and can be used for really good, like the filters, like on the phone, but it's not 100%. And so we still have to rely on that relationship with our kids and explaining what AI is, the good and the bad of it, because it can still get through. And we've seen that a lot in the news with all kinds of things happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to talk about that, but we did begin the show saying we're going to explain AI and VR. So maybe we can jump over to what VR is and then how those two.
Okay, absolutely. So VR is virtual reality. Also, a close cousin of that is augmented reality, or AR. So we have AR, AI, like it's easy to confuse all these. Virtual reality is the goggles that go on your face. You can't see out and you're immersed completely in a different world. Augmented reality, there's kind of some variation here. It goes anywhere from the goggles that are like that. Apple's getting ready to release some this year. They cover your vision, but they have cameras that look out, so you feel like it's just glasses. All the way to the Snapchat guys, they have glasses that are completely transparent, but they have cameras on the side that look out and can take photos, or I guess snap, photos all the time and be looking at things. Meta has the same thing as well, with some glasses as well as the goggles. So there's kind of a merging of the technologies at different price points, different things they can do, and people are still trying to figure out how to use those. One of the things that I read about in the last couple of days is that Meta and Microsoft and some of the big tech companies are looking at merging artificial intelligence with AI. And the way they're doing that is taking the goggles, which is physical hardware, and running these AI models. So they've trained it on something like, with the glasses, being able to look out and see a sign and say, oh, this is a pedestrian crossing sign or a stoplight for someone who's maybe vision impaired. It can help and speak to them. And when you're walking through, New York City or Chicago, can say there's a traffic on the left, your light is green, do not walk, those type of things. Or even bringing those models forwards to say, maybe even if you're autistic and you can't read people's facial expressions, can that model once again be trained on a human face and know, is this person happy? Is this person annoyed? Maybe it's trying to understand body language and say, okay, they're starting to back off or they're getting hostile to you, and be able to communicate that to someone who's blind or autistic or something like that.
My son, who's 14, He was telling me just the other day, he showed me this little clip of a guy wearing some of those glasses, and he was like able to look at a plant. And he said, "What is that?" I guess the AI explained to him what the plant was, if it was dangerous, as far as being poisonous. And I think that's what you're talking about, like merging the two worlds together to add the intelligence to the visual.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many ways that this can go. It depends on what people respond to, what type of things sell, and there are things out there that people focus on now that are doing a lot. That's where they're going to try to insert AI first. So it's up to us as Christians, I guess, to kind of shape that market and say, here's where our demand is. Is it to make better animated characters for, a Bible story, or is it out there to use it to try to promote some ideology of the world? We can, if they use it for the world, let's take that same technology and apply it for Christian principles rather than running away and saying, oh my gosh, this technology is evil. Remember that it's not evil. It's just how it's being used is evil.
It's so easy. And I've done it myself out of fear. A lot of times that's the first place we go as parents. When we see something, we're like, oh my gosh, so many bad things could happen. Get rid of it. Get rid of the phone. Get rid of the VR. Get rid of the AI, whatever. And we push it away, therefore making our kids sometimes even more curious because we're saying, no, no, no. But it's out there in the world instead of learning it and talking through it with our kids about how it can be used for good or used for things that we value. I love that you said that. And I think as Christians, that's one of those call to action moments that sometimes we're afraid to step into, but it's so important that we have a voice in this world that our kids are growing up in.
Yeah, totally antidotal. My house a couple of days ago on Christmas Eve, the lights burnt out, and we have lights around our house. We do it for like every holiday, and we love to light it up, and people see our house. It's really prominent in the community, and everyone can see it, and they love the lights. They love to see what I do with them. And so that's kind of like a little witnessing moment, because then when they see us in the neighborhood and they're like, oh, you're that house. And we have a moment to share, just a tiny bit of the gospel. And on Christmas Eve, the lights went out. It was raining. And so they went out and I reset and stuff. It ended up that that one of the power cords caught on fire, and there was this huge fire outside. And so after that, obviously I'm, a little stressed out about the moment. And I told my wife, I was like, I kind of just feel like I want to just turn off the power in the house and step back and not turn on the electricity ever again. And she's like, and what would you do if you did that? I was like, well, we'd have to get out the oil lamps, which probably is a bigger fire than electricity would be. And so, it's obviously an overreaction, and pulling away from electricity isn't going to solve my problem of a power cord catching on fire. What is to maintain it well, to take care of it, and to understand that cord had been out there too long in the yard and was starting to decompose. Not to say electricity is dangerous. If it's maintained well, those cords are going to transfer that power through them. That's going to, energize the house and let us do things that spread God's love around the community. So the goal isn't to run away from it, but to maintain it well, to grow and to understand it and to use it properly.
That's a great story. High five to your wife.
Yes.
That's so cool. Well, okay. So I'm glad we were able to establish what AI is and VR and how now they're kind of being merged together. I think most parents, and it is a generalization, but I think most of us want to know about what's happening in the AI world and how it's being used now to trick kids or for scammers to use it. Things that are happening on the horizon that we need to be aware of so we can talk about it with our kids and keep them safe.
Yes. So one of the places that our kids are the most is school. There's a lot going on there that we need to be aware of. I know you sent me an article earlier about a school, and the article talked about how the school was implementing policies, or they planned on taking care of policies and stuff. And as deep as the article went, and I've seen several of these type of articles, and all they say is policies. They don't go into specifics. And I think the schools and other people are a little bit unsure of what to do. I think the thing is, as parents, that we can ask specifics, and don't expect AI to be this magical thing that can be solved. Kids have been passing notes in school. They've been drawing crude pictures or laughing at kids ever since, school has existed, ever since there's been kids. So we're not going to solve it when we get to AI. any more than we have with any other piece of technology. So I think the key is to, if you're concerned about something like this, to ask the school, what happens, discipline wise, if something happens in the school? What is that policy? And obviously, are you going to follow through with that? Outside of school, it's about the legal system. What does your community, your state, the federal government getting involved, what can they do to help take care of this situation? For AI, most of us have probably heard it is called deep fake, a photo that's been modified, that's not real, that's been completely computer generated based on some person. That type of technology we've had it since Photoshop or even before then, with being able to manipulate images. And so I think the thing is to ground our kids in truth, to say, based on their age, obviously, is how you talk to them. But if a situation like this has happened where someone has Photoshopped or used AI to modify their body, put them in a compromising position or something, is to say, look, did you do that? If you didn't take off your clothes, if you weren't in that compromising position, then that's the truth. And this image is just a lie. It's not you. It's a fake image. So we want to teach our kids to ask questions, to dig into it, and to not just react, not dismiss their feelings, but also teach them to be grounded in that truth of what the situation really is.
The deep fakes, which are crazy how good they've gotten. And just to expand on that a little, there's been a lot of, reports in schools where they have taken your child's head image and put it on a naked body or, something in even a video, a pornographic video, and then distributed it. So the parents that we've walked through this with, or some version of this, I love that you are suggesting that there are detailed conversations with the school. How will you handle this if, which tells the school that you know what's going on. You are not putting your head in the sand, that you are aware and you want to be a part of the solution. Having these conversations with your kids about here's what people are capable of. You need to know that ahead of time, when you're taking a picture or when when you have a social media account. These are things that can happen. But on the tail end of that, one of the things that have been really powerful is parents, you really do need to say, no matter what, we will find a solution. And sometimes that solution is not convenient, or is it and it's not something that we want to do. But if we are on our kids' side and we know how deeply at those age, especially tweens and teens, how mortifying it can be to have something happen in your social circles or your whole school to see something, and it affects them greatly. We're talking about depression and suicide and all these things that come alongside of that. We want you to take that time to tell your kids before anything happens, hey, I'm on your side no matter what. If something like this ever happens, we'll figure out a solution, even if it means homeschooling, finding a new school, whatever. We will figure it out. Never think that you are hopeless or that we can't figure it out together. Kids need to hear that. And sometimes parents don't think to say that until after the fact when their kid's already struggling. So I really want to encourage parents today with this rise of things like deep fakes happening at younger and younger ages. Have that conversation with your kids and have it more than once. And it doesn't have to be a sit down deep thing. It's a, hey, I want you to know, I know what's happening out there. Here's what I've heard about. You can even use nextTalk and say, I heard it on this podcast with Marshall and Kim. I just want you to know we will figure it out. And that with the identity and who you are, which is a child of God, and that is it, period. Like you're saying, Marshall, that is so important that they have those two pieces to hold on to so that if something happens, they've already got that as the groundwork to stand on.
That's really well said. I think even beyond as the family, talking to them as parents is having that extended circle of people that you can trust, your village of people.
Yes.
Whether that's childcare workers or youth pastors or someone in your church, other people in the church that aren't even the clergy, but other friends, especially adults that they can trust to go to if something like this happens. If there's something like this where there's a deep fake of someone, they're not comfortable going to their parent first. They need to go to one of these other adults who can, tactfully handle it so that they can get up the courage to go to those next steps and talk about it with their parents and the school district and all those things. There's still places where, because this is a new technology, sometimes it goes off in left field, just like your toddler. You tell them, it's time to go, it's time to go, it's time to go. And they start walking towards you. They turn around and go get a toy and start playing. They just get distracted. And sometimes these AI models do the same thing. There's been instances where someone has said, I feel like I'm going to kill myself. What do I do? And it's like, here's how to get a piece of rope from, the store to hang yourself.
Oh my goodness.
And that's not what I was asking for. So you've got to watch, obviously when those things come up, they look at it and they say, okay, how can we fix this to not do that? But then someone else comes in and says, I'm struggling with eating disorder, and it gets confused and it's like, eat more food or eat less food. And that's the opposite of what you need to hear. And so just like if you misheard someone say, I'm eating too much, or I'm not eating too much, you can misunderstand someone easily. The AI models have the same problem. And so we need our kids especially, but even as adults, don't turn to these models to truly change your life. Look at it with skepticism, that healthy amount of skepticism, and making sure that it compares to other sources, that it's accurate, and don't use it when you're in a vulnerable spot.
That is a great tip. That's something that kids can hold on to. That's very practical. Don't use it when you're in a vulnerable spot or mindset. I love that. And don't use it as your source, your sole source for things. Cause like you're saying, those were some great examples. And you even shared with me before about, some sexuality things that were answered for minors, like in a chat GPT kind of situation.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about that?
They're trying to block that type of content. What is sex, or some variation of those terms, asking it, explain this, explain it like a haiku or a poem, or, in certain ways. And it'll come back and do that because it's saying, okay, I'll take what you asked me, or you give it some details of something and say, give me a summary of this, write it as a poem, something that a kid might be more susceptible to believing or taking into heart. We process songs different than we process words. And so we don't let our kids necessarily listen to the explicit rap that is, available on, streaming on audio. We also don't want to let them listen to something like this because it's going to go into their brain a different way. At the same time, you could possibly use it to take, here's how God designed our bodies to work with, in the context of marriage, and put that to a poem, and it can come back with this maybe beautiful poem, maybe really cheesy, whatever that is. If it works out, you modify it, you could have something that maybe does impact you. I think the thing is there, if someone has bad intentions or someone's naive and wants to, and happens to ask a question like this, it's going to use that regardless of the subject matter. It's going to try to fulfill that request.
One of the things I talked about in a reel, and then also on our show, was my son came home and had heard some stuff about AI and wanted to use it to help plan our vacation. And at first it was like, no, what? No, AI. Of course, that's where I wanted to go first. But instead I was like, okay, let's learn it together. Let's look at it. And it was really cool. Like we were able to put in the details of like what kind of things we like to do, the ages of our kids, where we were going, and it put together this super cool itinerary. But in that same thought, the conversation I had with him was, imagine if you had not told me and you saw what it could do. And then you said, what could a guy and a girl do in this situation? And it could have generated all kinds of things that may or may not be true or fall under your value system. And so it created good conversation there. But it also made me realize that good, bad side of AI. And I think it's something we're always going to have to deal with.
I don't know what site you used for this, but there's so much stuff now. High definition, if you remember, a decade or so ago, everything was high definition because it was the buzzword. So now everything is AI because it's the buzzword. High definition sunglasses aren't a TV screen. So they can't be high definition. In the same way, there's some things out there that just really aren't AI, and they're being marketed that way. The chances are the only way they're making money is by selling the information you type in or get out of that system. So, you've got to be worried about scammers. As an average Joe, most likely not, as far as being targeted by some scammer for some high value situation. But AI here can kind of help bring that level down and say, okay, it's no longer presidents, Fortune 500, CEOs and, congressmen that we're going to target. We can now use AI to sift through a lot more information. Plus, if you're handing it to them in this app, if your son typed in this information into some unreputable app, what's to keep potentially from it saying, okay, so they're going to go on vacation at this time. They said they're going to leave from this airport and they want to go for 7 days, and they're able to look back and, maybe it uses location history. Maybe it's something you typed in about which school you go to in a previous chat. Being able to use all that and kind of put it together and build a profile of this person, what's to prevent them from breaking into your house, while you're on vacation?
I'm so glad you said that. I did not think about that. And it's such a good point that AI takes all the information and brings it together for a certain purpose that may not be the one that you intended. So parents, this is another great conversation piece, is remind your kids that maybe this one time they type in about their school, and we always say, don't share any personal information ever. Yes. But let's say they're not thinking and they put in their school, and then this other time about the vacation, and this time about, whatever it is, something about maybe the hair color. And AI can bring all that together and create a profile for people who intend to do bad. Your kids may not be thinking in that way. And so this is another great point to talk with them about. And I'm so glad that you brought it up, because it leads me to this scam that we had heard about some while back, but I've heard it a few times now, where scammers are using AI to trick parents into believing that they've been kidnapped.
Yes.
And I don't even understand how that works. So maybe you can explain it. But again, collecting data to manipulate in this situation.
Mm-hmm. So I'm a skeptic of a lot of things. And so I'll say this as a quick disclaimer, that it's been possible for years to mimic your child's voice, because the reality is get any kid and have them scream mommy, and you're probably going to think it's your kid on the phone. So there is a healthy amount of skepticism there that's always been applicable. But with that said, we are now entering the age where AI can be used to synthesize voice. The popular show Adventures in Odyssey from Focus on the Family.
Yes.
One of their main actors has died. He passed away 2 years ago or so. Their latest episode has his voice in it, and they're using a different actor to play him, but they're using AI to synthesize the voice of the other actor.
Wow.
And the reception online from what I've seen has been overwhelmingly positive, that while maybe it's not perfect, it is still a pretty good thing. Right now, there's systems out there, and for the most part, the models that allow you to do that are being locked under paid type of contracts. It's making them lots of money to run these models, some of the corporations. And so they're extracting that value by charging, but it also is there to help prevent you from, the average Joe from just using the model to make a fake video of a president or another actor or something like that. There's a lot of voice actors out there who would be very mad to see their voice cloned by some average Joe and make something out of it. So there's some good pressure from, in this case, Hollywood, really saying like, oh, we don't want other people to do that. Please lock the models away. But it's only a matter of time before it becomes, at least in some fidelity of quality, accessible to the average Joe. So with that, if I remember even back with the Nazi concentration camps, they would take people into interrogation rooms and they would try to get them to talk and answer very benign questions. And then they would go back and they would take the tape and they would splice the tape with an X-Acto knife and taking, yes, I agree, and please don't. And they would put it into a different interview that said, do you want to disown your family? Yes, I do. Do you want to ever leave this camp, or are we treating you nice? No, I don't. It's great here. Wow. He never said that. He did say that, but he didn't say that.
Right.
And so, and there they weren't even synthesizing voice. They were just repiecing it together. And so whether AI is synthesizing a voice that they heard or that they're just trying to mimic that child, it's going to get better. So I think the what do we do with that is to always verify. A very first step would be if this person that is supposedly calling you from an unknown number and saying, hey, it's me, mommy, or it's your parent or an aunt, is to say, hang on just a minute and call their phone. Now, obviously they may be away from their phone or based on this, travel itinerary, you're up in the air on a plane for the next 6 hours. So I can't get a hold of you, but someone's claiming that you missed your flight and you're now stuck and you need, $5,000 wired. So there may be times that makes it harder. One of the things that would be useful that a guy named Johnson at the FBI shared some tips about this. He called it a family password. I would say a code word or something like that. Going back to the family drama Odyssey, they used a code word in there called applesauce. So don't use it. But but that word was kind of a secret that would let people know that it was actually, the inventor of the product was authorized. And so as a family, it's useful to have a code word. Anytime that it's used, make sure you change it to something else. If the kids tell the babysitter, change the word. If, there's a situation and they use it, then it's time to change that word again. So it stays a secret password.
That's great. We have encouraged that also. It's something we've always had in our family, and we've only had to use it once, and it's scary when it's used. Mm-hmm. But so also comforting in a way, because you have this way of verifying, one, that it's that person, or two, telling your parent, I need help now. And so yes, we use it for those two reasons. And something I would add to that, which I think a lot of us haven't thought of, is our elderly community is very susceptible mm-hmm. to being scammed. And so, if I got a call saying my kid was kidnapped, I may have more of the tools or the knowledge of saying, like, let me verify this. But if my kid called my mother or his grandmother, she may be more susceptible to falling for it because she wasn't raised in the digital age and may not know all of these things. So have that conversation with the grandparents too. Maybe have a special word for them also, or they're part of that extended family emergency word or password, because our elderly are definitely being targeted with scams, and they need to know how to protect your kids and themselves as well. So mm-hmm. that's great. Those are some great tips. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah. We've got, there's family drama all the time. So I would suggest that those passwords are in the smallest group as possible. Yes. Just like you don't share passwords among different websites, I hope, yes. Is the same thing here. If your kid is at your grandparent, at your parent's house and they're feeling unsafe there for some reason, they need to be able to use the password without,
yes,
raising that suspicion that it's the password. So, you don't want to overwhelm and passwords. Yeah, exactly. But, it depends on your family. How good are your kids or your parents at remembering multiple different passwords, or how much can you keep up with which password? Wait, did you say applesauce or did you say the other word? So yes. Anyways, you don't want to confuse yourself in those stressful moments, but having something like that to help verify something is a good thing.
I agree completely. Okay, so this has been a lot to process. I guess my last question for you would be, are there things that parents need to know, or things on the horizon, or anything about AI that we haven't covered today that you think would be helpful as parents?
Sure. On that side of like what's going forward, it's only going to become more prevalent in our society. Just like computers, just like cell phones and other technology, it's here to stay in some form or another. I think the key is teaching your kids how to use it as a tool and not as a crutch. For instance, there's, if they're struggling with math, don't let them use it to solve their math. But there are AI tools out there that can explain a problem. So if you sit mm-hmm. down with them, you're working with them, and you type in, some algebraic equation, and it sits down and it breaks it down and says, this is what's going on behind the scenes. You've now just learned a little bit better. If your kids Great. Are more isolated, we've had video games that have the NPCs, the non-player characters that are virtual and maybe use AI to run them. And, we've seen that now for decades, that it's useful to make the game more interesting. But if it crosses over to where they're using it for like a virtual friend, where they're disclosing their deepest, darkest secrets to it, whether audio or text, and they're starting to be able to understand that type of thing, where it can chat with you or talk, and respond and look like you're in a video chat with someone that's real, but it's just a game character or some sort of sim friend. Obviously, there's the sexual side of that should be a clear, obvious line. But even the more benign side, you need to make sure that they're having healthy relationships with actual humans, and even if they're struggling, that they have very strict limits around that and what's helpful. You can use AI as a cool party trick. I've made some cool things that can make, AI generated Bible lessons for Sunday school, which is a cool trick. I wouldn't verbatim go and take that and use it for Sunday school, but sometimes it's fun just to brainstorm and think outside the box of something. Using it as just a cool brainstorm might be acceptable, but depending on it for your work is most likely not. I think something that I didn't mention about how AI works is that the term is hallucination. If it's not trained on something, it doesn't know about it, but it may think it does. It's like that toddler that thinks they know everything and just babbles on about nothing. And so the more generally known a subject is, like oddly, the Bible. So there's a ton of stuff out on the internet, Bible studies. There's actually a good amount of stuff that does draw some interesting conclusions, that are at least not completely far off. But you also don't want to rely on that as your only thing. But some of those more nuanced things about like your high school or something in a small town, it may not know enough to tell the truth, even though it gives an answer that sounds just as sure as something about, another subject. So making sure your kids understand how to trust it and when to trust it, when maybe not to trust it as much.
Well, it just made me think that's a good, one-liner with your kid, that it's knowledge, but not necessarily truth. It's information, but not necessarily to be trusted. I think that's a real important distinction for your kids to understand.
Mm-hmm. I think going forwards, you're going to see AI be used in a variety of careers, whether it's, with the augmented reality goggles saying, oh, that pipe looks like it might be corroded, and, or the pressure is off on this line and it's this pipe up here, helping you do your job better, or whether it's more on the creative side, somehow fueling that, or even on the legal side or healthcare, where it's taking huge amounts of data and helping distill it down so you can make a better decision. Like even there, I think they're saying for certain MRIs or CAT scans that the AI is already better at diagnosing tumors than an actual doctor.
Wow.
And so if that keeps up, you still as a doctor need to know how to diagnose it by hand, but the computer can look at millions and millions of these things and use all that context to look at things, even on a CAT scan it wasn't for tumors, it was for some other, infection or something, but it may notice a tumor even though the doctor wasn't looking. So teaching your kids how to understand that it's just a tool will allow them to harness it, to use it in their careers when they become doctors or lawyers or, any other creative professional, to use it to help, obviously in our case, promote the gospel, promote keeping people healthy, but don't use it as a way to slack off and, well, the AI can kind of do it. So I just sit back and double check that it looks right and I don't pay attention. God wants us to be proactive. He says the worker is worthy of his wages. So you still need to work. You still need to have discernment. And then also remember that truth there, that God isn't about mostly true. He's about the way, the truth, and the life. So we want to really try to always be finding that and never settle to let the computer, whether it's AI or anything else, tell us what the answers are.
That brings us back to what we've said a few times here is whether good or bad, whatever the case, it's still a tool, and it's all about the conversations that you're having with your kids. You know, we are the ones who God has given us these kids. And it's our job to train them up and show them how to operate in this world as believers, no matter what is thrown our way, because AI is today, but tomorrow it'll be something else. And, you know, it'll send us into a tailspin again of, oh no, this is worse and horrible. But the answer is still the relationship. And the answer is still this relationship as well, with Jesus first. And then, you know, bringing that into your home with your kids and being open and letting them ask all the hard and weird questions and walking them through it. So, gosh, thank you so much. It's been so great to get your perspective and your insight and knowledge on AR and VR and AI, all the AI,
all the acronyms.
Yes. Obviously, I'm not an expert, but it has helped me with some really good practical things I can say to my kids. And I know it's helped our listeners too. We really appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
This podcast is ad-free because of all the people who donate to our nonprofit.
Make a donation today at nextTalk.org.
This podcast is not intended to replace the advice of a trained healthcare or legal professional or to diagnose, treat, or otherwise render expert advice regarding any type of medical, psychological, or legal problem. Listeners are advised to consult a qualified expert for treatment.